All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever wondered if you could get the entire story of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, in just a few minutes? Well, that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to boil down one of the most epic stories ever told into one single idea: a giant cosmic rescue plan. So the story kicks off in a pretty amazing way. I mean, picture a world with literally no pain, no sadness, nothing broken at all. Everything was perfect. And humanity had this incredible walking in the garden kind of friendship with God. It was perfect. So what went wrong? Well, the first humans, Adam and Eve, they had a choice to make: trust God or believe a lie from his enemy. They chose the lie. And that one choice to go their own way, what the Bible calls sin, wasn't just a tiny mistake. No, it was like a crack that shattered everything. That perfect friendship, broken. And suddenly you've got this huge problem, right? The world is now fractured. Humanity is separated from God. So how in the world do you fix something that broken? How could things ever be made right again? But here's the first big twist. God doesn't just scrap the whole project. Instead, he kicks off this massive, long-term rescue plan. And the goal was simple, but huge: to save humanity from sin completely, from the stain of it, the power it has over us, and eventually from its very presence. All right, so let's get into the first phase of this plan. It starts with some really dramatic stuff, and you'll see a surprisingly predictable pattern starts to emerge. Things on Earth got so bad, so full of violence and corruption, that God basically decides to hit a giant reset button. He finds one guy, Noah, who is still listening, and tells him to build this enormous boat to save his family and the animals from a world-covering flood. But here's the thing. You can wash the world clean with a flood, but that doesn't fix what's broken inside people's hearts. The core problem, sin, was still there. And humanity fell right back into the same old loop of making mistakes. It was obvious a bigger solution was needed. And you can see this pattern pop up over and over again for centuries. Check out this cycle. First, the people would drift away from God. Then, they'd get into trouble and an enemy would take over. Then, they'd cry out for help. And finally, God would send a deliverer, a rescuer. And then, you guessed it, the whole thing would start all over again. This crazy repeating cycle had to be broken for good. So God started sending prophets who talked about a totally different kind of rescuer. Not another temporary hero, but a permanent one. And get this, they said it would be a baby who would be called Emmanuel, which literally means God with us. Okay, so the stage is set. The rescue plan is about to hit its turning point, but it's going to happen in a way that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Think about it. After centuries of waiting, everyone's expecting a mighty king, a military genius who's going to crush their enemies. And who shows up? A helpless baby named Jesus, born to a poor family in an animal stable. It was the absolute opposite of what everyone was looking for. And as Jesus grew up, his message was just as shocking. He started talking about this kingdom of God where all the world's rules were completely flipped upside down. Love your enemies. The last will be first. The greatest people are the servants. This was a revolution. And this wasn't just talk. He started showing a kind of power that no one had ever seen before, a power over creation itself. There's this story where he's in a boat during a violent storm, and he just looks at the wind and the waves and says, "Stop." And it did, just like that. Now look at this number, 5,000. What's that about? Well, that's how many people he fed with one little kid's lunch. Just a few pieces of bread and a couple of fish. It was this powerful sign that in his kingdom, the normal rules of scarcity just don't apply. There's always enough. And his power went even further. He healed diseases no one could cure. But then he did the unthinkable. He brought a young girl who had just died back to life. This was a massive statement. He had authority over humanity's final enemy, death itself. But all of this, the incredible signs, the upside-down teachings, it was all pointing to one single moment. The most critical and surprising moment of the entire rescue plan. Okay, to get what happens next, we have to do a quick rewind to an old story called the Passover. The short version is this. Long ago, God's people were saved from an angel of death because they put the blood of a perfect sacrificed lamb on their doors. It was a powerful symbol of rescue. So, fast forward to Jesus' last meal with his friends. It just happens to be a Passover meal. He picks up the bread and wine and says something that must have just blown their minds. He says, "This is my body. This is my blood." He was basically saying, you know that old story about the lamb? That was a preview. I'm the real rescue. And just like he said what happened, his enemies arrested him and had him executed. For them, that was it. Game over. They thought they'd won. But what looked like a total defeat was actually the centerpiece of the rescue plan. Jesus was taking all the world's brokenness, all of its sin, onto himself. So, is that how the story ends? With the hero defeated? Is the rescue plan a failure? Or was his death not an ending at all, but the start of something brand new? Okay, so day 1, he's dead and buried in a tomb with soldiers guarding it. Day 2, still dead. But on day 3, the most impossible thing in history happens. His followers go to the tomb and it's empty. He was alive. He had faced death head-on and defeated it. Now, before he left, Jesus told his followers that the rescue mission was now theirs to continue, but he promised they wouldn't be doing it alone. He said he would send them a helper, the very Spirit of God, to live inside them and give them the power to change the world. And did that helper ever arrive? The plan just exploded. After just one speech by his disciple Peter, this many people, 3,000, joined the movement. In a single day. The rescue plan was officially going global. And that's what changed everything. This whole story shifted from being about one nation in the Middle East to a personal invitation for anyone, anywhere on Earth. An invitation to be rescued from this broken world and to join this upside-down kingdom. Which really leaves us with one final question. 2,000 years later, what is the legacy of a rescue plan like that for us, right here, right now?